really good to see you again. And
You too?
since the last time I spoke to you, you've had a big rebrand. So you've got
We have,
this
yeah.
kind of cool, almost like sci-fi name. Like, where did that
Yeah.
come from? How did you decide on that?
Yeah, so I'll give you the story really because it informs the name. But so when we first started out, 2.5 years ago, the name ticker came from stock market ticker symbol. So when you buy a share in the stock market, every single share has a ticker, like an abbreviation of the company name. So it was kind of like an industry insider name for us to choose. And if you think about what's happened over the past 2.5 years, you've seen the rise of the short-term trading products and the trading apps. And I think that name ticker, is more closely related to short-term investing versus what we stand for, which is like long-term wealth creation. That's what we are about. So that's one thing. The second was what we see in the market as well as the rise of like ethical and sustainable products. And I think a lot of these companies get their angle wrong in the sense that they come across a little bit too worthy and do good, and I don't think that has mass appeal. So what we wanted to do is an exercise this year. We spent like 4 or 5 months doing it, where we kind of tackle both of those things at the same time and produce a tone of voice and visual identity that is more on the building the future side of sustainability and impact. So we're creating the future that we all want to live in. So you invest for your future and our future, and have a name that represents the long-term future. So Circa5000 is a metaphor for building the year 5000, basically, for yourself, for your family, with your money. So it's all really about anchoring in the future that we want to see. And so that's why there's an element of sci-fi, I suppose, with the name and the identity, because it's all about a vision of the future that we can all kind of get behind. So that was the rationale.
Yeah, nice. Does it come with any kind of new approaches to how you invest? Or did it come with any kind of new tools or anything like that? I mean, what's happened in the last year in terms of how your app's changed?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we're just about to launch our first pension
Oh,
product,
wow.
so SIPs. That'll be out in the next few weeks. So we've been working on that because the best thing you can do for your future is prepare for that moment in time. And it's also probably the biggest amount of money that our generation and the generation above and below have to invest. So if we can kind of get pension money aligned with the companies of the future and creating the future, we can have meaningful change. So that's a new thing that we wanted to bring out very quickly after we did the rebrand, because it's the most long-term investing that we can do, and I think it's and as I said, it's the biggest pot of money that people have. So we can kind of align that with creating a better future. I think we'll kind of impact the world in the way we want to
I
see
love
it. So
that.
that's one of the big product launches that we've been working
Yeah.
on, and then it's really just a focus on, for us. I came to this kind of investing whilst working at a company called Wellington Management, and it actually came from an original piece of work we did. We used to do, and I think they still do it every year, called future themes. So what we do is, we do a piece of research and we analyze what we think is an investable theme of the future. And what we started to realize more and more, a group of us, was that these themes have a massive social and environmental underpinning. So water scarcity is a huge problem. And if companies do it right and they scale, not only can they solve that problem, but they can earn, good returns as well, because they're solving this huge issue. So really for us, it's kind of getting back to our foundations of investing in these cool companies of the future, but all of them are still solving these big world problems that we need to solve, but using technology to enable them to scale the solutions to that. So what you'll see from us in the next kind of few months and from now in the future is bringing out more investment functionality and bringing out our own investment funds, which are all kind of anchored around this. So one of the things we've been talking about for some time is bringing out our own Circa5000 now branded funds in the market, with our brand of long-term impact investing. So that's now being kind of sped up to kind of get to a launch point. So we'll be doing that probably in the next quarter or two, and that's kind of been helped by us realigning our thinking on the core foundations of what we do. So a lot more focus on that innovation and investment, basically.
Yeah,
Is
that sounds
focus.
super exciting. Can you give us an example of say, like two of the future investable themes that you're talking about and some of the companies that might fit under that?
Yeah, so what we'd be looking to, there's some of the themes that what we'd look to do is launch themes that on the surface exist in the stock market, but are very badly implemented by most asset managers. For example, The obvious one are areas like climate change. What you have is a lot of the existing industry investing in companies that are just, they're not outright good for the climate, but they're just not bad for the world. So you're just left with like neutral stuff underneath. But these companies are not providing solutions to huge climate change problems. So within one of the themes that we're looking at, like the future of food. So companies like Beyond Meat would be in there, Oatly would be in there. So companies that we know and that we love today, but are really using technology to transition the way we consume food, basically. So that's one that people know really, really well. And then we'd look to some of the more technology-enabled themes as well that are around like hydrogen, different forms of new energy that are coming to the market. And we'd look to bring in, exciting new themes like that where possible, where we find enough companies to express that in an overall theme. So there's a mixture of re-engineering how things are done currently from the stock market and bringing out brand new stuff that nobody has launched yet.
So for people new to investing, because I think your platform certainly appeals to people that are brand new to investing, and you really explain it in simple terms and make it easy for people. But there is a lot of greenwash out there. Can you just talk about how you talk about these themes and what these companies are doing and how you make your investment choices and how you communicate that to your users in a way that they can understand and talk about with other people?
Yeah. So I think for us, the major difference between how we approach building our themes versus how it's generally done is what we're looking for. First of all, we define like some big world problems that we want to invest in and solve. These sometimes are loosely mapped to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, but they're not a perfect kind of mapping for it because they're not designed to be investable goals. For example, one of the themes is end poverty. I mean, there's no one company selling end poverty solution, you know what I mean? But there's companies that can kind of go towards it. So we think about world problems through that lens. And then what we try to identify is companies whose business model, the product and service they're selling, is directly linked to that problem. So for example, housing, we're trying to find companies that build affordable homes for kind of previously excluded families, and that's the only revenue line they have in an ideal world. So that's the holy grail, is we're trying to find companies that are pure play in our minds, so they have 100% of their revenue from one specific thing or multiple themes. That's a major sift on the stock market. So it kind of gets the stock market, say, down by 90% of companies. It kind of removes 90% of companies. And then you can do additional layers of analysis on top of that. But that's why the makeup of our themes and portfolios will look different to the makeup of the themes and portfolios of generic funds, basically. Because if you look at an ESG fund, for example, now we're not an ESG investment manager. I can go into the details of that and explain it. But ESG really is used as like a screening mechanism. So you're screening companies out that score badly on an environmental, social, or governance risk perspective. And that's why those portfolios tend to be full of banks and people like Coca-Cola and things like that, because these companies are not outright bad for the world, but they're not necessarily producing a solution to any major problem. So you'll never see those in our portfolio, but you will see companies like Vestas Wind Systems, the biggest wind energy provider in the world. You'll see Beyond Meat and Oatly, who I've previously mentioned, because they are screened in because their revenue is directly linked to solving a world problem. That's the major difference. And I think the way that we try and bring our customers close to this and understand it is obviously communicating it like that, but in the app itself, one of the big areas that we're working on now is, if you look at the app and you're familiar with it, there is a discover feed of content. It's really version 1 of that. In the next 6 weeks, a second version is coming out where we present impact data and impact stories of all the companies that we're investing in. So you will get sent regular content of the companies. So you will get the data, but the data is a little bit meaningless without the narrative. So you'll see that this company's done this, remove this amount of equivalent CO2 from the atmosphere. But in reality, this is what it means for on the ground, and this is what it means for people that they've benefited, etc. And try and do it in a narrativized way. I think that's the way you really bring this kind of investing to life, is you make it, ultimately you make it human and you make it understandable, not just data and carbon removal and things like that. Because I love this kind of investing, obviously, but that data doesn't really mean anything to me either. So if I just see CO2 data, I'm like, well, what, is that good? Is it bad? I don't really know what that means. So I think you need both. So that's how we kind of transmit the message to customers.
Yeah, nice. And that's all found in the app, and it's all there for people to explore.
Correct,
yeah,
yeah.
Cool. Okay, let's talk a little bit about performance. So, I know plenty of people that want to start investing, are curious about it, and they want to do it in a way that has a positive impact on the world, but they're still
Yeah.
worried about performance. So what are you seeing in terms of performance of this type of positive impact investing against the rest of the market? And also, how do you think that's going to change in the future as things like climate action and all of that, increases? And
Yeah. So the analogy I use before I go into specifics of like my experience and our experience here at Circa5000 is that it's all in how it's implemented. So if you remove impact from the equation and you just look at any other fund or any other fund manager or any other asset manager, it's all in how they implement their strategy, basically. So you'll get good ones and you'll get bad ones. And it's the same with impact investing. Just because it's impact doesn't mean it will default be worse or default be better. It's all in the implementation. So the reason why we think the version that we do has a strong returns argument and the data backs it up is because we approach the inception of the portfolio construction like this. So we're investing in the companies of the future. These companies of the future, they're kind of underpinned by a huge structural shift in the way that we consume something or a problem that we need to solve. And the companies that are doing it in a technology-enabled way allow them to scale, and that through that scale they can offer outsized return potential. That's the returns argument of what we do. We've seen it, I saw it in my previous life, and we've seen it at Circa5000. There's some fantastic returns for some of the customers. Obviously, it depends when you join the platform, etc., etc. But last year was generally a very good year, and this year, a lot of the teams have been performing very, very well. And it's because of how we construct it. It's like the way to think about it, and the reason why the rebrand focuses a lot more on the future is because this is future theme investing, just with a positive impact lens. So you're not investing in anything that's technology, but you're investing in the technology that's clearly good for people and planet, basically. That's the way to think about it from a returns perspective. Not, this is ethical and I might have to give something up. I kind of, forget that as a starting point. That's like old industry baggage that's ruining the way people think. This is just future theme. That's the way I think about it. I think the evolution of it, if you think about the structural trends, the structural shifts are very, very positive, I think, because I think all these problems, whether they're climate related or planet related or people related, are getting more and more well telegraphed, and there's more and more companies coming to the market, stock market, or prior to the stock market, smaller companies looking to solve these problems in a for-profit way. So I think the returns potential and the availability of good companies to invest in is increasing, and therefore I think the return potential will be stronger now and in the future, because there's becoming a more and more of awareness that we need to solve these problems, and because of that, more capital is flowing to companies starting to solve these problems, and I think that creates a cycle, and I think that cycle could result in decent returns. So I think the potential of it is strong and will get stronger.
Yeah. So because you think so long term in the way that you're investing, I mean, what's the sort of minimum number of years people should try and stay invested with you?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one that I'm 33, I'm an old man now, basically, I'm past it. But I started working at Barclays 11 years ago. It's when I first started investing, was like my first week. Obviously, I had no idea what I was doing. And if somebody had said to me at the time that I would stay invested for over 10 years, which is true, I've not stopped for 10 years, and I've been regularly adding. And I've only ever taken money out if I'd needed something personally. It wasn't anything to do with the performance of the stock market. It was just like, I need to now buy a car or something, boring. If someone had said to me 10 years at a time, I'd have felt daunted by that. But really, there's no need to be, because what everyone should start with is a strategy of adding money consistently. Add what you can and increase it over time as you hopefully earn more and you're building your future, and just stick with it. I wouldn't necessarily think of it as I need to do this as a minimum time frame. However, you shouldn't really be investing in the stock market if you have immediate needs for your cash. You should keep it in cash, because there is risk involved. So when I'm talking to people and when I'm talking to our customers, I'm saying to them, 3, 5, 7 years. And I think once you get to the 3 point, it's very easy to then do 5 and 7. And once you're at 7, it's very easy to do 10 and 15. And then before you know it, you've invested for your whole life, basically. So that you can't say invest for your whole life to people, because that seems daunting. But if you take it in chunks like that and approach investing like that, there shouldn't be a point where I really don't think people should approach investing as I have X amount now and I need 50% more in 2 years' time, or else I can't do the thing that I need to do in 2 years' time. I would just see it as something that you're building and a habit that you're creating for the long term, basically. Like starting going to the gym. You don't go to the gym, I'm just going to do it for a year and then I'm going to finish. You create a lifestyle habit, and people who do that do it for their entire lives. And I think that's the way to think about it in a non-daunting way.
Yeah, I think that's a really good analogy. So before we start talking about risk a little bit more, can you just give me like 3 quick examples of companies that are, creating profits from solving the problems of the future? I mean, some examples that maybe aren't things like renewable energy, for example, which I think we're all familiar with, but what other things are going on that people might not be aware of?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple of examples. So obviously climate is really easy for people to understand, but one of the areas that I'm as passionate about, if not now slightly more passionate about, is the people stuff, because I think the stories and the impact there are just so much more clear to understand, I think, actually, and so much they connect with you more because it's a human level thing. So for example, there's a company in Brazil called Croton Educational, or Educational. That was me trying to do a Portuguese. And what they do is they educate predominantly underprivileged children in Brazil using remote learning technology to deliver to kids in rural Brazil what kids in classrooms in the cities get, basically. So they use technology as a solution to do that. So they're enabling hundreds of thousands and millions of kids who wouldn't have got good quality education to get it, no matter where they are in the whole country. So for me, that connects with me in a way that a CO2 number could never ever connect with me. And there's companies like that, all around the world, basically, that we're trying to dig out. There's another company that we actually don't have in the portfolio right now, but I love it. One of the themes right now. It's a company that I used to work on, but this is just an illustration of kind of what you would invest in. There's a company in India called Vakranji, and what they do is they set up these called kendras, which I think translates as huts in parts of rural India, and they bring internet access and banking access to parts of India that wouldn't have it otherwise. And the economic uplift you can get in areas just from having been able to have a bank account, access the internet, order things online. This is like digital divide and financial inclusion. These are 2 big themes for us that you could never imagine coming from where we're from, because all these things are taken for granted. But then it enables people to have lives that they could never have dreamed of having a few decades ago in these places. And this is real, like, human empowerment stuff. Now, I think that stuff connects with people in a more immediate way than some of the climate stuff. So, and they're doing amazingly well. They think about the site. This is the thing, right? They are a mission-driven company. These 2 companies I've mentioned are mission-driven, but the problems they're solving are massive in their local markets. So that's why they can develop into scalable for-profit businesses and be great return potential, because they're solving huge problems that have this big social underpinning. So it's these kind of companies that we're kind of looking for.
Yeah, nice. Okay, let's talk about risk. So can you give me the idiot's guide to how risk is worked out, how you communicate that with to your customers, and also, like, how scary is it? Should people be scared of it? What does it mean? Yeah.
It's great. It's a great question. I mean, it's the thing as well. Like, the word risk outside of investing means something scarier than it means in the world of investing. So it's almost like we need to create another word for people who are new to this, because when you're used to investing, it's like the 2 prior to impact, which I think is the 3rd dimension, or it will be, fully eventually. It's just return and risk. And the idea in investing is you accept a level of return for a certain level of risk. And in order to get more return, the idea is that you'll have to take more risk, basically, to get more return. So the way to think about it, we've just produced another video for this. It's going to be in the app, which I'm happy to share around, because this is the perennial question, basically, risk, because it's all related to your own personal needs and your time frame again. So if we go back to the example I gave before of me investing for 10 years, my appetite for risk, because my time horizon is very, very long, is super high, basically. I can take loads of risk. And generally speaking, if you're a young person and you have no fixed need for the money and no fixed deadline, then you should be taking as much risk as possible, because all that risk means is the amount your money will go up and down in the short term. But generally, if you take more risk over the long term, you'll receive more return and you'll receive a better ultimate outcome. That's why everyone has a pension now in the UK and in loads of other countries. Your pension when you're in your 20s, in the background, whether you realise it or not, is being invested for maximum risk at that moment in time, because you don't need the money until you're 55, 60, 65. So you can take as much risk as you want now. And the idea is that you'll be in a better position at the end because you've taken risk earlier. The caveat to all that is if you have an immediate goal in mind, 2-3 years, or you don't like the idea of your money moving up and down a lot in the short term. I remember when I first started investing, and my first investment I made, this was prior to me really caring, obviously, about impact, with everything that I stand for. I made an investment in an oil company with my first paycheck at Barclays, and it went down 50% in 2 weeks. I didn't know what I was doing. I just made an investment, and that was a good learning experience for me. But that movement of it, I was like, right, wow, it shocked me, and I needed to understand more. But now I've been doing this for 10 years. The movements in the short term do not faze me one bit, because I've been through this 10 years, and I know what the end destination is. And if you look at the long-term stock market charts, they kind of just go in one direction, really steadily up and to the right. But if you zoom in on any one period of time, it might look like this. So your job, and this is why we promote something called dollar cost averaging, which is an industry term, which basically just means you invest the same amount every single month on the same date. And that way you get into a discipline of consistently being in the market and increasing your money. And you buy more when the stock market's down, and you buy less when the stock market's up. And you kind of average in your entry price, and it takes the emotion out of it. So if you're trying to time all this stuff, you'll never get it right. The best investors in the world never, ever get it right, or they get it right, sometimes, but not in a repeatable way. So, and you're not one of them, and I'm not one of them. So just remove that from the equation, invest. By all means, understand what's going on in the stock market, and that's why we try and send our customers kind of commentary, and this is why this has happened, and all those kind of things. But your job is to invest for the long term, stay with it, stay regular. And if you can do it for a really long period of time, you can take more risk. It's not as scary as the word risk sounds, especially if you have a long time horizon and you can stick with it. Obviously, like I said, the caveat is personally what you like and what you want to see. About 75% of our customers are in the high risk versions of our themes. Now, I think that's probably an education. Hopefully some education coming through, and they are investing for the long term, so they know they can do it. But some people just don't like the idea that the money's moving around, regularly, and they want some more comfort, something more steady, and that's fine. But understand that you may give up some return if you're doing that and you're doing it over the long term.
Nice, that was so well explained. Thank you. So one of the reasons why I started Economy of Good in the first place was to just get more people to think about investing, particularly women, people from working class backgrounds, people of colour. How are you seeing sort of investor diversity changing? Do you think it's improving, or do you think we've still got a lot of work to do? And what do you think is helping to improve diversity?
I think it's massively improving, but from a very poor starting point. So there's still an awful long way to go. It's never been as good as it is now, but that doesn't mean we're at the end destination. Far from it. I come from working class town. I come from Wigan, in the northwest of England. No one here grows up with the idea that you can invest and that you should invest in any of those things. And I think now there are more tools, and people are spoken to more online and in advertising about investing and getting started. Some of that I don't think is the right kind of investing for them to be doing. I think the worrying thing for me is what seems to be permeating down to people that have never invested before is the most risky forms of investing. Versus, it's like people have never swam before and they've never had a lesson, but they're just jumping in with great white sharks straight away. That instead they've not even been in the local baths yet and had a lesson from the teacher. So they go in trading crypto on a random crypto exchange, and they're losing thousands of pounds and they'll never invest again. So that I think what you have now is a situation where it feels most diverse and most welcoming because there's more tools and it's being spoken about more. We're at a very low starting point with a long way to go. And what needs to be given more airtime, or people need to understand more, is some proper investment principles and long-term investment principles. I see a lot of people, and I admire the people that can do it and can consistently earn returns, although I think it's a tiny percentage of people that think they can stock pick with their own money and analyse companies who have never done have never spent time in the industry and don't know how to do that from a professional point of view. Now, that's not saying some people can't do it. I think they probably can, but I've never done that with my own personal money, really. I obviously did it as a day job, but I had all the data and all the brains in the world behind me to do it, and we still got it wrong. So I think what I hope happens, and I hope we can be a major part of this, is like a renaissance or an introduction of proper investment thinking and proper long-term thinking, and bring that to people, as opposed to them either sitting in cash and buying houses and trading crypto. They invest some of that cash steadily for the long term in a way that's good for them and good for everyone else. I think that's how we need to harness that energy a little bit. But you're competing with a McDonald's diet for some of these companies. It's like the Big Mac, the double Big Mac that's being sold at the moment near me. That's you're competing with that immediate feeling of something good, but you feel terrible half an hour after you've eaten it. But there are people that want a long-term sustainable diet as well. So it's like that sell. It's like that emotional difference. But I think it's improving. The makeup of our customer base is encouraging. The kind of people that we have investing with us is really encouraging. But I think we're still very much at like day one of changing who investing is for and who invests. And there's a long way to go.
Yeah. So I've just got two final questions. So the first one is, what would you say directly to somebody who is thinking about doing this and doing it with impacts, but are still a bit worried about it, taking the plunge? What would you say to them?
Start small and read and learn as you do. So I remember when I used to have a boss who, Barclays, my first boss, who was like full of wisdom, full of advice, right? And he was like, you don't know what investing is like, or losing or making money is like, until you just do it. So do it and learn as you go, basically. So for me, that was buying that company and learning, and then going down 50%, and then me making more considerate decisions after that. And learning how to invest properly. But my advice would be to do a little bit of research on the platform that you want to start with, ideally us, obviously. But start small and learn about it. And then as you grow in confidence, build it up. I think everybody should invest in a certain way. I don't think everyone should trade stocks and pick single line stocks. I really don't think they should. But I think we should all invest in a long-term way for our future. So start and learn is my advice.
Nice. And my final question is just around the industry and positive impact platforms like yours, and other types of financial institutions that are that do operate with values. Like, what do you all need to become the norm in our economy? Is it like some policy change, or I don't know, what's going to help you all grow and become the norm?
Yeah, that's a great question, and not one I've heard phrased like that before. Ultimately, I think it's customer adoption and customer demand, really. I mean, you can regulate these things in, and I think the UK government is one of the most advanced in trying to make impact investing more the norm. But whether you believe it or not, the UK is one of the most advanced impact investment markets in the world. So I think the government is trying, and there are task force and initiatives all over the place trying to make this happen. I think they'll get there, but I think regulation is always much slower than what actually happens with customers and on the ground. So I think for us, it's transmitting the message and getting people to adopt. If people adopt, this becomes the default way of doing things. Others will follow suit. The regulation will catch up, and it'll become the way we invest. Like the mark of success for us in the next 10 years is if impact investing just becomes known as investing. That's how we'll judge our own success, basically. And I think the only way we can get there is by getting people to adopt the app and use it and invest this way. So I think that's ultimately the way. That's what we'll live and die by is the adoption.
Yeah,
of it.
nice. All right, well that's it. So when is your pension coming out?
It is provisionally the 19th of November.
Nice.
So it's within the next couple of weeks.
Awesome. Well, that's really exciting. Thank you so much. Yeah. I always love having a chat with you, so I really appreciate your
great.
time.
Really, great questions. I love them.
Cool.